Please, I'm begging you, Kevin. Go visit Elizabeth and see how she's doing.
Would you quiet down? I'm at a crucial point where I might actually become the manager. If this messes up my chance for promotion, what are you going to do about it? We could be stuck living like this forever.
I don't mind that at all. I was planning to start working part-time anyway, and that would let me think about what's next for Elizabeth. But Kevin just kept saying, "You don't understand anything." My sister-in-law, Sarah, then said to me, "Emily, doesn't that sound a bit off? We need more data to make such a definitive statement." So, what should I do? When I asked, the two of them looked stern. Sarah replied, "Regardless of the reason, if she's being given such unclear medication, we need to sort that out first." Got it. But what can I do? Then Sarah said,
Call an ambulance.
"An ambulance?"
Please, Emily, that's your job.
My brother David said that to emphasize his point to me.
While you do that, we'll look into this doctor.
Yeah, for my lovely niece, I won't rule out any means necessary.
My name is Emily. I'm 37. I live with my husband Kevin and our daughter Elizabeth. Kevin and I were colleagues and have been married for 13 years. With Elizabeth starting middle school this spring, I was thinking of working part-time and changing our lifestyle a bit. We thought we were living fairly peaceful days. Yes, up until very recently.
Mom, my leg hurts.
One day during the spring break, Elizabeth came back from outside and suddenly said that, "My goodness, what happened? Where does it hurt?"
My knee feels dull, heavy, and sore inside.
It's unusual for this normally stoic girl to say something like this. That meant we had to see a doctor, so we went to our local doctor at Smith Clinic. We've been going to Smith Clinic since we moved here after getting married, cared for by the previous doctor, Louis. Now, his daughter, Mary, has taken over and is looking after the health of our town. Our family is one of those she looks after. When Mary saw Elizabeth's condition, her expression turned grim. "Is something wrong?" She suggested, "Let's take an X-ray." Elizabeth looked at me anxiously. "It's okay," I reassured her as I sent her off. But Mary told us the result with a serious face. "This isn't good." "What do you mean by isn't good?"
Let's talk about that later. But
As I tilted my head, Dr. Mary firmly stated,
she needs to be hospitalized for a while.
She said it outright. And when Elizabeth was admitted, I was the only one called in, and she clearly stated,
Elizabeth has osteosarcoma. This is a type of childhood cancer.
"Osteosarcoma, childhood cancer." Both words chilled me to the bone. I remember reading about osteosarcoma in a comic once where the main character suffered from it. I hesitantly asked, "Could this possibly mean, that she might have to have her leg amputated or something like that?" In the comic, that's what the protagonist was told.
No, I don't think it's that severe, but if we leave it untreated, it could get really bad. So let's start the treatment early.
I could only trust Mary with her words. Once the word treatment was mentioned, there was nothing more I could say. And Kevin felt the same. When I first told Kevin about Elizabeth's illness, he said to me,
Well, that's tough. But don't worry, just leave it to Mary.
And then he went to bed early, as he had another busy day the next day. Honestly, our relationship as a couple isn't great. I often convince myself that maybe this is normal for most families. We've been married for 13 years. Since Elizabeth was born, I've been more of a mother than a wife, and I'm aware that Kevin doesn't really see me as a woman anymore. My gaining weight is probably one of the reasons, but that's something beyond my control. Now, we're more like a family that happens to have a child named Elizabeth than a couple. Still, when I heard our daughter was being hospitalized, I thought he could at least be a bit surprised or worried and show some appropriate reaction as a father. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was sad she couldn't attend the middle school entrance ceremony.
Mom, how long do I need to stay in the hospital?
I could only respond with, "Well, it might take a while." Honestly, that's all I can say.
It's so boring. I was looking forward to starting middle school, making new friends, and all that.
Hearing that really hurt me. Elizabeth was looking forward to joining a sports club and enjoying her middle school life. Yet, her middle school life stumbled right from the start.
By the way, Mom,
What is it?
Dad hardly ever comes to visit, does he? I can't even see my friends, and the only people I meet all day are you and Mary. It's so boring.
Elizabeth looked lonely as she said that. Indeed, that's true. Recently, she hasn't been able to meet anyone. If that's the case, we should let her friends visit her in the hospital, but they won't allow it. It's a critical time, they say, giving her therapeutic IVs and urging her to rest as much as possible, though not absolute rest. Is it really such a critical time? I wondered, but as a layperson, I wouldn't know. I kept asking Kevin, "Please, could you visit Elizabeth? She needs you." But the answer I get was this.
Sorry, but I'm really busy right now. I don't have time to deal with you.
It's not about me. It's about Elizabeth. I argue back. If it were about me, maybe it would be okay to ignore it. But can you really just ignore your own daughter?
Would you quiet down? I'm at a crucial point where I might actually become the manager. If this messes up my chance for promotion, what are you going to do about it? We could be stuck living like this forever.
I don't mind that at all. I was planning to start working part-time anyway, and that would let me think about what's next for Elizabeth. But Kevin just said, "You don't understand anything." He then cut off the conversation. "You don't understand anything" has been a constant complaint from Kevin towards me. Come to think of it, he's always been like that. I've known Kevin since we were colleagues, but his demeanor changed subtly after he met my brother when we started considering marriage. I lost my parents in a car accident during high school. Since then, my older brother David, who's a bit older than me, has also acted as my guardian. By the way, David is a veteran nurse. It's been his longtime dream to be a strong male nurse who can handle the tough tasks that female nurses often find challenging, and he eagerly pursued this career. David's wife, my sister-in-law Sarah, is a bit older than him and a physician. They might seem like an unlikely couple from the outside, but I've always thought they were perfect for each other. And they seem truly happy, which is something I've always aspired to have. Since they're both workaholics and don't have children, they've always doted on Elizabeth since she was born. As I was thinking about my life with Kevin, I suddenly realized I hadn't told David and Sarah about Elizabeth's situation. What am I doing? I can't believe I forgot. Despite being overwhelmed by the sudden developments, I hadn't contacted them, even though they're always concerned about her. I hurriedly reached out to them, and they responded immediately. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Sarah and David yelled through the tablet screen. "I'm sorry, I was just a bit overwhelmed."
Well, that's understandable, but pediatric cancer, osteosarcoma, is that clinic okay?
Sarah tilted her head as she asked me her question. "What do you mean?"
Well, was the diagnosis just based on an X-ray?
"Sorry, I'm not very knowledgeable about this." They glanced at each other. Realizing the conversation was getting too technical for me, a layperson, they seemed to forget that sometimes.
Sorry about that. So, what's being done now?
She's hospitalized and getting daily 4 treatments. They said it's a critical time. They looked at each other again, their expressions turning anxious.
Emily, doesn't that sound a bit off?
"What's off?"
Sorry, but just hearing that, it seems medically unsound.
I tilted my head, wondering if that's really the case.
Basing a diagnosis of pediatric cancer or osteosarcoma on just an X-ray is odd. What about blood tests, CT scans? You need various data to make such a diagnosis.
Yeah, my brother chimed in.
And to hospitalize her immediately for that treatment? That seems way off to me too.
So, what should we do? I asked, and David's face turned stern.
You need to stop that treatment right away.
Right. You can't administer the right medication without a proper diagnosis. It's odd to do anything based on that alone.
I realized they might be right.
And if it really is pediatric cancer, thinking of treating it at your local clinic is just ridiculous.
It made sense when they put it that way.
There are quite a few general hospitals around here, right? Ours is one of them, but if they're classified as a pediatric hospital, they have to give appropriate treatment. So I think they have to take the baby to a general hospital first, rather than just treating them at the clinic.
Ah, that's right. Yes, that really is true. What was I thinking? It was the same when Elizabeth was born. We had to transport her to a major hospital because Smith Clinic wasn't equipped to handle it, following Lewis's advice. Thanks to that, both Elizabeth and I were saved. It's shameful that I had forgotten such a thing. So, what should I do?
Whatever the reason, if they're giving her some unclear medication, we need to sort that out first.
I understand. But what can I do? What can I possibly do? Then Sarah said,
Call an ambulance.
An ambulance?
Even from a small clinic like ours, it's common to send an ambulance to a major hospital if they can't handle it.
Please, Emily, that's your role.
David urged me.
In the meantime, we'll investigate this doctor.
The word investigate made me pause. What does that mean?
Right. For our dear niece, we won't choose our means.
She's like a daughter to us. How can we not help in such a situation?
Hearing this from David and Sarah, tears rolled down my cheeks unexpectedly. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
It's okay. By the way, how is Kevin doing?
I tilted my head at Sarah's words. Well,
His own daughter is going through a crisis, and he isn't doing anything?
Kevin is at a critical point where he might become a manager, and he's overwhelmed. He hasn't even come to the hospital. The two exchanged looks, seeming to come to an understanding.
Anyway, you need to call 911 to get Elizabeth transferred to our hospital.
Understood. And I hurried to Smith Clinic and went to Elizabeth's room. But when I opened the door, I was confronted with the sight of Elizabeth looking utterly exhausted. What happened? As I reached for the nurse call button, I remembered our earlier conversation. Right, 911. I called from the hospital. Excuse me, this is Smith Clinic, but something is wrong with my daughter. There was confusion on the other side of the phone, wondering why I was calling from the clinic itself. Please, I beg you. Please, please. My desperate repetition seemed to convey the urgency. The ambulance arrived shortly after, and just as it arrived, another car pulled up. It was Sarah's. From the hospital window, I saw the ambulance pull up to the front of Smith Clinic, its sirens fading. Paramedics emerged from the ambulance. I waved frantically from the window. Over here! Over here! Responding to my signal, the paramedics started towards the hospital.
What is this? What in the world?
A nurse from the clinic rushed out. Following her, Sarah, still in her lab coat, hurried towards us.
It's an emergency.
She rushed into a room as she said that. Sarah, it's Elizabeth.
Emily, how's Elizabeth?
Sarah immediately went to Elizabeth's side, and upon seeing the forebag, her face filled with shock. She quickly removed the injection needle from Elizabeth's arm, checked her pulse, eyes, and various other signs, and briefly explained the situation to the paramedics.
Understood. This is serious. We need to hurry.
The paramedics nodded and placed Elizabeth on the stretcher. Then, hearing the commotion, Mary rushed into the room.
What are you doing? Why is there an ambulance here? And why Elizabeth? Who are you? How can you do this without my consent, her primary physician?
Mary blurted those words out all at once, and then glared sharply at both me and Sarah. Not to be outdone, Sarah glared back at her and declared,
I am this woman's, Emily's, sister-in-law and Elizabeth's aunt. I am also a doctor at Central Hospital.
At these words, Mary visibly shook.
The symptoms Elizabeth is showing now are clearly due to an overdose from this 4-drip. What were you thinking administering such a thing?
Mary's complexion changed upon seeing the 4-bag in Sarah's hand. What's going on here? I asked Sarah about it.
Well, the fact that Elizabeth is showing these symptoms now gives us a pretty good idea. Let's head to Central Hospital right away.
Yes.
And you?
Sarah pointed sharply at Mary.
I have some serious questions for you later. Be prepared. You've put my niece in this condition.
We could hear Mary clicking her tongue. It was the first time I had seen her show such an attitude. Sarah urged, let's go quickly. And so I quickly moved to leave the place with everyone. But as I passed by Mary, I definitely heard her mutter,
All this support, yet you can't do anything yourself.
It was a low, resentful voice. She thought that about me.
Let's go.
Urged by Sarah, I boarded the ambulance. Soon after arriving at the emergency department of Central Hospital, Elizabeth was immediately treated, and her lethargic state quickly improved.
Why was she given such a large dose of this?
Both the paramedics and the doctors were astonished upon seeing the 4-bag that had been brought in. It was a fluid used during treatment, but not meant to be administered all day long.
Admitted right away and continuously given this? So she wasn't hospitalized to get better, but to get worse.
Such direct expressions of astonishment came from the mouths of the surrounding doctors, and I was surprised. Hey, so Mary did that. But why? She's supposed to look after Elizabeth. I explained that she had been hospitalized under suspicion of osteosarcoma, and so the hospital immediately performed various tests. But the doctor who conducted the CT scan turned pale instantly.
Osteosarcoma? That's ridiculous. This is just arthritis. Ridiculous? How could such a basic misdiagnosis happen?
The emergency room doctor was so angry. I was surprised. Is it that easy to tell the difference? No, even if it's that simple, it's impossible for a layperson to judge. Was Mary using that to deceive me? David then said, Anyway, for now we have a private room available in our hospital, so let's keep a close eye on her until she recovers. Surprised, I said, A private room?
Don't worry, it's available now, and if it's about the cost, we will cover it.
I had some concerns, but nothing could replace Elizabeth's life. That night, I set up a side bed in the private room and stayed overnight. Thanks to the treatment, Elizabeth regained consciousness, but was frightened and wanted me to stay with her all the time. I myself, not knowing what might happen, had resolved to stay by her side throughout. Later that night, after Elizabeth had fallen asleep, I began to doze off when suddenly I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. I immediately woke up, but pretended to be asleep. Then I heard the door to the room quietly open. Someone was creeping closer.
After all the things I thought I could do for her,
It was Mary's voice.
now that it has come to this,
I heard the sound of rummaging through a bag. Then she pulled out a small bottle and a syringe. As I prepared to move, I strained my eyes to see what she was doing. Mary opened the bottle and drew some liquid into the syringe. She then reached for Elizabeth's arm, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "What are you doing?" I jumped up and lunged at her.
whoa,
With that, the bottle and syringe rolled across the floor.
oh, you're heavy. I can't breathe. Oh, you were awake?
It's not about whether I was awake.
Get off, you're too heavy.
My body weight, though not quite double, was perhaps 1.5 times that of Mary. Struggling, she couldn't move at all under my weight. Startled by the commotion, Elizabeth woke up and asked in surprise, "Hey, why? What's happening?" I told her urgently, "Elizabeth, hit the nurse call button." "Okay." She pressed the nurse call repeatedly in a panic. Soon, footsteps approached from the nurse's station on this floor. The door opened and the lights came on.
What on earth is going on here?
It was my brother who spoke. Then, once again, I could hear Mary clicking her tongue.
Well done, Emily.
While saying this, my brother secured Mary's hands and feet with bands.
This should keep her immobilized for now.
He then picked up the drop medicine bottle, his expression distorting.
What were you planning to do with our niece's life?
His anger was palpable.
Because you took her away from my clinic, I thought I could find an easier and less painful way. Because of what you did, I had to act quickly.
Had to? What does that mean? Her vague words frightened me. My brother looked at me and said clearly,
Basically, this person, though a doctor, was after Elizabeth's life.
Suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe.
What were you trying to do to me, Mary?
Elizabeth was almost crying when she exclaimed that. Then there was the sound of the door opening again. Sarah entered, and it seemed someone else was behind her.
She came after all.
After all?
I thought if we did this, she would surely come herself. That's why I arranged for a private room. I didn't want to disturb the other patients.
With that, Sarah signaled to someone behind her to come in.
I rushed to get an answer, but it was incredibly simple, wasn't it, Kevin?
Yeah. I was confused as to why Kevin was here.
What's going on, David, Sarah? Calling me here at this hour.
Kevin, it's no use. Everything we did has been found out.
Mary, why are you here? And why are you in such a state?
It was then that Kevin seemed to notice Mary, who was restrained and on the floor, and he hurriedly spoke to her. "Kevin? Mary? Are you too close?" I shouted that when my brother shushed me. Right. Elizabeth is listening.
It's okay, Mom.
Elizabeth shouted.
I want to know everything. After all, I'm here, and all the pain of not being able to start middle school right away, it's all because of you and Mary, isn't it?
Elizabeth, you're really perceptive.
Sarah gently stroked Elizabeth's shoulders and back.
I'm already in middle school. It's better I understand these things. It's better to be told than to be kept in the dark. So please tell me, Mom.
I was at a loss, and frustrated with myself for being so helpless. Sarah then confronted Mary with the medication she had picked up.
This is a muscle relaxant you brought, isn't it? If you had injected this concentration directly, it's obvious what would happen to this child.
Sarah's hands were gloved, surely to preserve evidence.
Your ride is here.
Then more visitors arrived in the room. It was really good that the room was spacious. The visitors, showing their police badges to Kevin and Mary, declared firmly,
I'm from the county police department. Dr. Mary, you are under arrest for the current offenses. Kevin, as an accomplice, you will accompany us.
Kevin reflexively tried to flee upon hearing this.
Hold on. You're not getting away.
David's strong hands grabbed Kevin's shoulder.
I've been acting as Emily's guardian since our parents died, thinking you would bring happiness to our family. But what is this? Your own child.
While holding back his shouting, Sarah invited another person in.
Well, it was really urgent, so we had to bring in a number of people quickly. But thanks to that, we figured it out. This man has been embezzling money from the company.
Embezzlement? I let out the word unintentionally, and Kevin averted his gaze.
Sorry, we're from a private investigator's office. We were asked to look into this urgently.
But Kevin said he was on the verge of becoming a manager. That's why he's been so busy and hasn't even stopped by the house or come to visit her in the hospital. The investigator continued matter-of-factly.
About that. It's the other way around. He was supposed to become a manager originally, but it was put on hold because he was suspected of embezzlement.
But he never said a word. I hadn't imagined it.
And to cover what he embezzled, he wanted the insurance money.
Insurance money?
This man had taken out a $200,000 life insurance policy on his daughter.
I couldn't immediately grasp the implications. So, Kevin, were you planning to use Elizabeth's life to cover your debts?
I had no choice. Otherwise, I would have been kicked out of the company.
What are you talking about? Involuntarily, I swung my hand at Kevin. With a smack, my large hand struck Kevin's cheek, and he fell to the ground.
Damn. You've really gotten big. That's why I lost interest in you.
That has nothing to do with this. So, you were distracted by the always beautiful Mary because I gained weight.
Yes. Ever since you gave birth, you just kept getting bigger and bigger.
I was at a loss for words. I wanted to stay slim too, but I got sick during my pregnancy. It couldn't be helped.
That's right. Emily got kidney issues during her pregnancy. Since then, it's been easier for her to gain weight. That's inevitable.
Sarah added supportively.
That's one thing. But it was during that time that Mary comforted me.
The officers present sighed in response.
Forget it. The main issue now is that this man tried to take his daughter's life. And you, sir, you asked her to do it. For now, we'll take these people into custody. I understand your anger, ma'am, but you wouldn't want to be charged with assault, would you?
I was taken aback.
We'll make sure you don't face any charges. It's going to be tough enough handling things for your daughter from here on.
Yes. Oh, but let me ask just one thing. Didn't you love Elizabeth? I asked Kevin.
I did at first. But as you kept gaining weight, I thought Elizabeth might end up the same. And I just didn't care anymore.
So, Dad, you thought of me that way? And then you just didn't want me anymore?
Elizabeth began to cry on the spot. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hugged Elizabeth. It's because of me, isn't it?
No, it's not your fault, Mom. You always did what was best for me. I understand that even as a middle schooler. Dad is just blaming everything on you. I don't want to call him Dad anymore. Just do whatever you want.
That's probably for the best.
Sarah agreed with her.
And you were the head of Smith Clinic, right? A medical professional doing something like this, even though it was prevented, you can never return to this field again. Was he so important to you that you'd throw away your entire career over this?
You wouldn't understand.
Mary retorted bitterly.
I worked hard to take over the current hospital, but Kevin was the only one who saw me as a woman. Do you think you could understand that feeling?
There's no way I could. I'm not you.
I made an effort. Unlike you, I really tried to approach her.
David and Sarah nodded to each other. Mary groaned and then fainted on the spot. Sarah checked Mary's pulse and condition. She then said, "She's stable," and allowed the police to take her away. Then I turned to Kevin. "I'll have a lawyer handle the divorce papers. We don't matter to you anymore, right? If we don't matter, then let's never interact again. Oh, and I'll be taking alimony and child support for raising her, all in one lump sum." I never expected to be able to say such things so calmly. It must have been building up inside me. Kevin glared at me in frustration. But I was no longer going to lose to that. "Goodbye then." I said my parting words to Kevin. Afterwards, the two were arrested and eventually brought to trial. Due to the premeditated nature of the act and the execution of the intent to take a life, Kevin and Mary were sentenced to prison even though the crime was prevented. With Mary's arrest, Smith Clinic was forced to close. Even though Louis is already an elderly, he had to write referrals for current patients, which became a significant burden.
I'm truly sorry for what you've had to endure.
No, Mary has been a help to us for a long time. How did it come to this?
Perhaps I expected too much from her.
Louis murmured sadly. Though it was difficult to accept, Louis made sure to pay the compensation owed.
It's going to be tough for both of you from here on out. Since we're closing the clinic anyway, we'll make some money off the equipment sale.
That's what Louis told me. Kevin was also convicted. Though he was not the executioner but the instigator, he complained, "A prison sentence is too harsh." Unfortunately, under the law, instigation is considered complicity. He received a prison sentence. Initially, it was Kevin's idea, and without him, Mary would likely not have strayed. This case, being an attempted insurance murder of his daughter, made the local news. Being a victim myself, it became difficult to continue living in this area. During this time, Sarah and David suggested, "Why don't we move away?"
Actually, we were thinking of serving in rural healthcare for a while. I'm a doctor, and David is a nurse, so it's a perfect fit.
We were planning to move far away eventually, but the timing just never worked out. How about coming with us?
They invited me like that. Perhaps the scandal made it uncomfortable to stay at the hospital. Their offer reflected a kindness that didn't need to be explicitly stated. So I took them up on it. After a while, we moved to a distant state. Though it was a rural area, a shopping mall was just an hour's drive away. It turned out that this area had been without a successor to the local clinic, and there was no doctor for a while. Having a reliable place in town was significant, especially since not everyone can drive, particularly in areas with many elderly people. The loss of Smith Clinic, where Mary worked, was a significant blow to the community. Once my brother and his wife settled into the new clinic, I was hired to manage the office. Initially, they couldn't offer much salary due to my lack of experience, but that was fine. Having any job was a blessing, given my plans to start part-time work. With the addition of alimony and child support, I could comfortably raise my daughter. Elizabeth's health also returned, and she grew taller rapidly. It seems the arthritis was related to growing pains. How they exploited that. Now she's thriving in the sports clubs of this sparsely populated area. With my new family, I hope for a peaceful life ahead.